Hi guys, today's lesson is adding and subtracting decimals. Now we could jump right in and go ahead and add or subtract, but I want to kind of show you how it's done to better understand it using base 10 models. Now in the past when we use base 10 models, we've represented the hundreds flat as 100, the tens rod as 10, and the unit, the smaller one, as 1. With decimals, those kind of get switched up on you. So the hundreds flat now becomes the ones place value. The tens rod now becomes the tenths, and the unit becomes 100ths because there is 100 units in 1 hundreds flat. There's 10 rods and hundreds flat. So in this case, we're using a different value for the base 10 models. So I'm going to keep this little key up here just so you can look at it and not get confused, because I know it's kind of hard to retrain your brain. Something we've learned for a very long time is now switched up on us. So we're going to use an example of 6 and 12 hundredths. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my 6 ones. I've got 1/100th, 1/10th, and 2/100ths. And I'm going to add to that, let me switch up the color here for us so it's easier to keep track, 3 78/100ths. So I have 3 ones, 7 tenths, and 8 hundredths. Okay? I need to know what my total is. Well, again, we're going to use these base 10 models to figure out our total before we even begin adding our decimals. So right now, when I add up my hundredths, I should have 10. This means that they're going to be regrouped into a tenths rod. And when I go over here and add this up, that means that we place a 0 down and carry the 1. Now I'm going to go ahead and add up my tenths place. Well, when you add up your tenths place, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And 7 plus 1 plus the 1 I carried is 9, so that's correct. Lastly, we want to make sure that we add up our ones place. So to do this, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ones. This is probably the most important step when finishing. You want to make sure that when you're done, you go ahead and record your decimal point. If you don't record your decimal point, it looks like 991s, but we want to make sure that people recognize it's 9 and 90 hundredths. So make sure you have that decimal point there. That's really, really important. So we're going to go ahead and do another one. So this is a great time if you want to go ahead and pause, make sure you read it or re-listen to it. And the new decimal we're going to do this time is 6 and 69 hundredths. And we want to add 5 and 74 hundredths to that. So let's go ahead and model our first number, which is 6 and 69 hundredths. I have 6 ones, 6 tenths, and 9 hundredths. Okay. Let me change the color for you so it's easier. I'm going to go ahead and add my 5 ones, 7 tenths, and 4 hundredths. Now remember, we use the models to help us find the solution. So I'm going to go ahead and count up my hundredths, and I have 13 of them. That means that I'm going to use 10 of them and regroup it to the tenths place. This is the same as adding 9 plus 4, so we record the 3 and we carry the 1 that was regrouped. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and add up my tens place. I have 6 plus the 7 that I originally had plus the 1 that was carried over. That is 14 of them. So I'm going to make sure I have 10 to regroup. Into a hundreds flat. Nice and large for you. And that means that I have 4 remaining. Okay. 6 plus 7 is 13, plus 1 is the 14, and we carried the 1. Alright, so our last step is to add the ones place. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And when I double check, 6 plus 5 is 11, plus 1 is 12. And remember, we want to make sure that we place that decimal point exactly where it belongs, right below the other ones. We want to make sure this is lined up so our place values are nice and even and able to be worked with. Okay? Alright, now we're entering into subtraction. When subtracting, it's really important to understand that we're not modeling both numbers. This 4 and 32/100ths is your total. That never changes. It will never change unless it's being subtracted from. So when you talk about recording both sets of decimals, very similar to what we did with adding, you're adding instead of subtracting. So I want to show you how to subtract with models. So the first thing that we're going to do is we do want to go ahead and model the total 4 and 32/100ths. So we've got 4 ones, 3 tenths, and 2 hundredths. So this is what I mean that we don't go ahead and draw what 1 and 18/100ths looks like. We're actually going to take the 1 and 18/100ths and subtract from it. So we subtract starting off with the hundreds place. This is the place value that we start with. When we normally are calculating, it's right to left. So I'm taking a look at these two, and I'm thinking I've got to take 8 from it. And I really can't take 8 from 2. I can, but it's a negative number. And since we're not dealing with negative integers, I'm actually going to borrow and regroup. That's a common phrase that we've used in the past. So we borrow from the tens place and regroup into 10/100ths. Now I can actually take 8 or subtract 8 from that. Okay, and I'm left with 4 hundredths. So mathematically what's happening is because we were unable to subtract, we borrowed from the 3 tenths, it became 2 tenths, and we regrouped so that way we're working with 12. Okay. This is what we've done in the past with subtracting, with borrowing and regrouping. I just wanted to make sure that you guys had a model to be able to help you connect the dots for you guys. Alright, so let's move on to the tenths place. We've got 2 tenths, and I need to subtract 1 tenth from that. I can definitely do that because I have 2 total. So I'm going to subtract 1, and I have 1 left. Now before I go anywhere, I want to make sure I have my decimal point lined up, ready to go. Alright, so my last step is that I need to understand that I'm subtracting 1 from 4. So I'm subtracting 1 from 4, and I end up with 3 ones. So my total is 3 and 14/100ths. Alright, let's try another one. I know you guys are eager to do this. And even if you're not, we're still learning. So there's one where I want to work with a whole number. So 26 Actually, let's make this a little less. Let's make it 6. And I want to subtract 2 and 52 hundredths from that. Well, notice where I place my 6. My 6 is currently in the ones place. So if it's in the ones place, we want to make sure that we go ahead and record these missing place values with zeros. There's nothing there, so the digit that represents nothing is 0. So this is common when you go and pay for something at a store with the cashier. We want to make sure that we understand what's actually happening. So we have 6, and we're subtracting 2 and 52 hundredths from that. So I'm going to go ahead and model my 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ones. Now, right away, I noticed them having subtract 2 from nothing. And I know in the past that we've said, okay, this is important. I need to borrow and regroup. Well, I know that I can't borrow anything from that 0. So I'm going to go to the 6, and he becomes a 5. Because I went 2 place values, this is going to end up becoming a 9 because I had to borrow twice. Okay, so now that I have nothing, what's going to end up happening is this becomes 10 tenths. And ready for this? And we also had to borrow from the tenths to get 10 hundredths. Okay, so let me stop and make sure my model is accurately portraying what's happening. So far, I have 5 ones. And yes, I had to borrow in order to regroup, so I should have 5 ones. Second of all, I should have 9 tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Sure enough, I have 9 tenths because I had to borrow 1 to regroup the hundredths. Now I can actually start subtracting. So I'm going to subtract using the red so it's easier to follow. I need to subtract 2 from my hundredths. And when I subtract 2, that means I have 8 remaining. Now looking at the tenths rods, I need to subtract 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This means that I have 4 tenths remaining. Placing my decimal point is important just so people understand the place value. And the very last step we're going to do to accomplish our problem successfully is subtract 2 ones, which means I have a remainder of 3 ones. So my final answer is 3 and 48 hundredths. Once again, notice how we use the models to help us understand how to find our answer. We didn't solve the subtraction problem or the addition problem and then model what the answer looks like using place value. That's really important in trying to use strategies to help us understand. All right, guys, keep an eye out for multiplication and division that is coming up soon. Best of luck.